everyone, welcome to the next installment of Charts and Perspective, where we use charts to dive into the world of economics and financial markets. I'm Jennifer Nash, an economic and market research analyst for TMX Verify. Inflation remains a hot topic, directly impacting everything from your grocery bill to interest rates. In the latest inflation data through May 2025, the two key inflation gauges showed that prices are still above the Federal Reserve's 2% target. But what exactly is inflation? Simply put, it's the rate at which prices for goods and services rise, which then leads to a decline in purchasing power over time. So the amount of money that you have now would eventually buy you less stuff in the future. The two main measures of inflation are the Personal Consumption Expenditures, PCE price index, and the Consumer Price Index. There are a handful of differences between the two, but the main difference is the basket of goods and services constructed to measure them. There are items in the CPI that are not included in the PCE price index, and vice versa. However, the Fed is on record as using PCE data as its primary inflation gauge, with a 2% target rate. More specifically, the Fed has stressed the importance of core inflation to assess underlying inflationary trends, since it excludes food and energy prices, which tend to be more volatile. So throughout this video, we'll be looking at and comparing the core measures for each metric. So why does the Federal Reserve pay more attention to core PCE than core CPI when assessing its progress in managing inflation? This side-by-side comparison reveals key differences. One of the primary reasons is volatility. Core PCE tends to be considerably less volatile than core CPI. This stability makes it a more reliable indicator for the Fed, which has a dual mandate of achieving price stability and maximum employment. Historically, the less erratic nature of core PCE has made it the preferred metric of choice, though the disinflationary trend in core PCE prior to 2022 cast doubt on the effectiveness of the Fed's monetary policy. Our next chart overlays the two series, starting in 1960. A long-term look back at both the Consumer Price Index and the PCE Price Index reveals that the two generally track each other and tend to move in the same direction. But again, we can see that core CPI is the more volatile of the two. Now let's zoom in on the 21st century. Prior to 2021, inflation remained below 3%. However, the COVID pandemic triggered the highest rates since the early 80s. Core PCE peaked at 5.57% in February 2022, and core CPI followed in September at 6.63%. Although both have since declined, recent data suggests inflation may be stalling out above the Fed's 2% target, with core PCE at 2.7% and core CPI at 2.8%. In the previous two charts, it was easy to see that core CPI tends to be higher than core PCE. Since 1960, it's registered a higher reading nearly 80% of the time. On average, core CPI has been 48 basis points, or 0.48%, higher than core PCE. As of May 2025, the gap has narrowed to 11 basis points, or 0.11%. This next chart helps us compare the cumulative change in the two indexes since 1960. The two grew at a similar rate up until around 1980. However, over time, the core PCE indicates significantly lower inflationary growth. As of May 2025, core CPI has grown 973% since 1960, while core PCE has only grown nearly a third less at 693%. While, quote, core inflation helps economists identify trends, it's easy to understand why so many people are confused by the exclusion of food and energy from core measures. After all, these are essential monthly expenses, but the extreme volatility of prices for items like gas, as shown in this chart here, often obscures the underlying inflationary trends that policymakers are focused on. While the Fed believes inflation remains, quote, somewhat elevated, the statement from their latest meeting showed that the Fed remains strongly committed to returning inflation to its 2% target. That's all for our discussion. Thank you for tuning in. For more economic and market insights, you can find my content regularly on the Advisor Perspectives website under the AP Charts section.